Hi guys, it's me, Dr. Hardy, and as you can see, there's a photo behind me of a woman named Syesha Mercado. And as most of you know, I am a pediatrician, and so this story really hits home for me as a medical provider that cares for children and what's in their best interest. So I'm going to glance down a bit at my paper because I jotted down some things. And I don't want to forget anything, but just, a premise of the story is that she was on season 8 of American Idol. I should say that first. Beautiful voice. You may remember her. And she brought her child named Amin-Ra to the hospital because it looked like he was having trouble transitioning to solid foods. So he gets admitted to Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in Florida. And while there, they noticed that he had failure to thrive, which is basically when a child's weight is less than the third percentile. So that means they're not getting enough calories or nutrition for development. So they usually look really bad when they come in. These kids with failure to thrive, you just want to hold them and just take care of them. They just look pretty wimpy and, they have muscle atrophy. Sometimes you can see all their ribs. Their hair will be really thin, almost the way an adult anorexic sometimes looks. Their hair is really thin and fine. Their skin has no luster. Because they just don't have enough nutrition. So it looks like the hospital or the pediatricians consulted a Dr. Smith, who's a child abuse specialist, pediatric specialist. And that's who I would call when I worked at a tertiary care children's hospital in residency. We would call this person in to see what they think, to give us their expert opinion on how a child is doing, the family dynamic. Do they think this is abuse, aka neglect in the situation, so it doesn't have to be physical abuse to abuse a child. It could be verbal, which a child rarely gets taken away for verbal abuse, but it's usually medical when they're in the medical arena. And I heard this term, medical kidnapping, and I don't like it because I'm part of the medical community. It made me feel bad. Like, I'm part of a system that can allow a child to be medically kidnapped. Whew. So I shared this story with a few people, with a few family members and friends, via Instagram, Messenger, and all this stuff because I was just shocked. Now, I've heard of these stories happening even back in the day, before my time, all kinds of stories, older, elderly people, grandparents might tell you what happened during their days. Usually minority, elderly people, from my experience. And we knew it was something that happened. But I guess you always feel like it's not going to happen to you or your family, or you feel like it could and you're terrified to bring your kid to the doctor because you don't want them taken away. Now, as a Black female, or Afro-Latina pediatrician, I used to work in an outpatient clinic that served a majority, like 95%, underserved population, and that was a common thing that parents told me. Like, I was afraid to bring them in. When I said, why wouldn't you bring them in sooner? What happened? This has been festering for a long time. Why today? What made it different today? Or something like that. And they would say, I was afraid that my child would get taken away from me, but now I'm at the point that they're not getting better, or something like that. So with Syesha's story, it sounds like the child was admitted for 2 weeks, which sounds about right as a pediatric professional. If the child had failure to thrive, sometimes they're in there for a long time. They're monitoring ins and outs, like how much they take in and how much they poop and pee out, and does it match, because you want to rule out any metabolic disorders. It's a big workup sometimes. But apparently, they refused a B12 shot. So as I dig into this story, I don't know enough, and I may not, because they may not divulge that type of medical information publicly, but I am assuming that there may have been either B12 deficiency or some kind of rare anemia that's only treated, like pernicious anemia, that's only treated with B12 shots. And these parents practice a holistic lifestyle, so you understand that they may question getting the shot, asking why, what would it help, can you explain? I would expect that. So as I get to learn my families, even in the first, 10 minutes, I can gauge, what type of family they are. For example, if the child never got immunizations from birth, I already know that they may be against immunization. So of course they may question a B12 shot. You put things together. And so the question is, what happened? Is there documented education to the parents? Saying, was there a refusal form signed by the parents that the parent refuses to receive, or if they have their child receive the B12 shot? That would be really important to know in this situation. Can they prove that the parent refused medical treatment? Can they prove with documentation that a certain amount of education was given to the parent about why it was necessary? Is there documentation that if this child doesn't get this medical treatment, that this can result in death? I mean, I've had parents who were vegan and things like that, and things come up like this, like nutrition deficiencies, and once you give them education, they usually do really well with any changes that they need to make for growth and development. So apparently, Syesha was pregnant when this child got taken away, and the timeline may be skewed a bit here, so forgive me if I'm wrong with the timeline, but she gave birth shortly after this happened, and then they took her newborn baby away, and they pulled her over on the street, like sheriff following her, pulled her over and like literally snatched her baby from her. So now 2 babies are taken away. So how does that happen? I know I work in inpatient pediatrics, so same kind of scenario. If we have a concern about a child, we consult social services. They might consult CPS, and there's always a chance that a child can be taken away for whatever reason we have concerns about. But her first child has been taken away. She comes to the hospital, delivers, and I guess some states have an alert where if this parent has an open case against them, or if they don't have custody of one child, and that's a red flag. So they consult social services to make sure it's safe for this baby to go home with these parents. So that makes sense, right? If you were unfit for the first child, what makes you fit for the second? So I think the hospital was probably doing what they felt was right for the second child to at least alert social services that make sure this baby is safe. But yet, the social services have any documentation that warrants taking a child away right from birth. Now, as a pediatrician, I will say it usually has to be something really bad for a child to be taken away from their parents. Now, I've only worked as a physician in North Carolina and Virginia, and I tell you, I will literally call social services about concerns, legitimate concerns. I will say things like, the parent is high right now, and this child cannot go home with the parent. Like, like blatant crazy. And they will come and do their assessment, and the child will get to still go home with the parent. And one case I remember, a child went home with the parent and that child died when they went home. I think there were 2 cases like that. And then the second one, I think they went to jail, the parents, but 2 babies died because social services, I'm not knocking social services at all. I'm knocking the system, right? They're trapped in a system that lets them say yay or nay. They may really feel in their heart that this isn't a good situation. And it's crazy. And another crazy thing is the pediatrician or the medical provider in this case, it could be a family practitioner who, doesn't have to be a pediatrician. We don't know the assessment by the social services provider, meaning that we put in the concern or the call, and then they just come back with a result like, oh, CPS says that, they can have, they can see the baby with supervision, or they're getting taken away and they're going into foster care. But we don't know what happened or what were the red flags in their assessment that made them say, this child needs to be taken away. And I think that's very important, because I think if we as medical providers can see the criteria of why a child is being taken away, we can advocate better for our patients. For example, if Syesha was my patient in the hospital and I was able to see something about B12 shots, that would give me the opportunity to go back and talk to her and ask her what was her concern about the shot, what could I answer about the shot, get better documentation, better understanding of the family before a child can be whisked away. And matter of fact, is that reason enough to take a child away? Now, every state is different, but I know some states, I can get a court order and say, I want this child to be in the custody of the state or myself to give this medical treatment, and then give the custody back to the parent at some point, but not necessarily take them away. It just, they won't have, legal custody to make the medical decision. Now, I'm not a lawyer. Again, I could be misspeaking with the nuances of the process, but I think it is sounding ridiculous. And I've seen worse scenarios where the child isn't taken away from the parent. So this is very difficult for me. And I think pediatricians, the AAP, we need to advocate for our patients better. We need to make a change. We need to lobby to be able to be a part of the process of the decision making. We need to be able to see what was written in their documentation that made them say that this is an unfit parent, because a lot of the time we know the patient and parents better than social services. And I know I can say, this is why they think that way. Or, I know their cultural background. I know some of their religious beliefs. We know the patient better. This is like one snapshot moment in time for social services to just come in and make an assessment. So I do think we pediatricians need to make a change. We need to be a part of the assessment. And even if there's a specialty where that's all this pediatrician does, we have an in-house pediatrician to go over these social cases with the social worker. I mean, that would be fabulous, because there's no way that we should be okay with a story like this. Syesha, I'm so sorry. I don't want to cry. It's ridiculous though. Whew. I feel like the system has failed you, your child. And we know there are health disparities in general. There are disparities. Everybody is starting to know that now in medicine. So there's disparities in these situations too, like you said in one of your YouTube videos, that maybe they weren't used to someone looking like you asking these types of questions. So, I'm so sorry. And I'm so pissed. But I want to talk a little more about this maybe in another video. My experiences as a pediatrician in social cases like this, and to answer questions that people have about social situations. Feel free to put some questions in the comments. It may give me an idea of something to talk about that the people really need to understand. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for listening.